Hello and welcome. My name is Eric from Blog, and today we are joined by Andrew Morgan and Remko Weijnen, if I could spell that correctly, and we're going to learn about the new features of the latest release of ThinKiosk 4.0. So first, Andrew, could you tell me how came you to create this product? Why did you create ThinKiosk as it is?
I kind of covered this off in the slide deck a little later on, but I started ThinKiosk back in 2011. I was working as an architect on a virtualization project at the time, and I was looking at my options as to what you can do with recycling current hardware and turning them into thin clients. At the time, I was struggling with HDX flash redirection and leveraging local hardware. All of those options that I wanted to get out of a thin client, but I was looking at the solutions for converting PCs, and they just really weren't there. They were very expensive for what they were offering. The functionality-wise, they were terrible, and there was nothing really based on Windows. So I decided, if you couldn't beat them, join them. So I wrote ThinKiosk.
Cool. And how come that Remko joined the team?
Do you want to take that one, Remko?
Yes, of course. Well, I've known Andrew for some long time longer. I think we first met at Synergy.
2011, yeah.
Yeah, and well, basically, I've seen the same annoyances with thin clients or existing solutions. And I've also seen that the thin clients that we've been recommending to customers for years weren't lasting because they didn't support HDX. So customers were thinking about other solutions, and then I saw ThinKiosk, I liked it, and as a few techies, we started talking at Synergy with a beer, and we started brainstorming about all the features we could add, and that started to get things going, and finally we ended up here where we are now.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember back in the days, I won't tell the name of the vendor, but when they released the thin clients that was supposed to be HDX ready, remember? And you figure out that it didn't support the HDX MIDI stream for Flash, so you were stuck with a PC if you want to get full the benefits of the HDX. So yeah, I think turning computers into thin clients is the best options.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Since starting the project, the amount of interest and community feedback has been brilliant. And I mean, originally speaking, we thought we would, well, I thought I would publish ThinKiosk out for free. People may like it. I'll get a couple of downloads, and that might be that. But it absolutely blew up. Within the first month, I had 1,000 to 2,000 downloads. I was getting emails daily about the product and what they wanted to see in it going forward. And it really did become a part-time job to keep it going, and I really enjoyed it all the way through. And then, of course, when Remko showed interest and he had some solutions there that would help us out, we decided we'd march down that route. Okay, well, without further ado, I suppose I'll get started on the presentation, if that's okay with you, Trond?
Yeah, just go ahead. You rock the show.
Perfect. Okay, so to introduce to anybody who doesn't know me yet, my name is Andrew Morgan. I work as a senior solutions architect, particularly in the VDI space. I've worked there for about 10 years, working with server-based computing and virtualization for the last 8. I was bestowed with the Citrix CTP and the ORIA software ORSVP programs, very proud of those, and I'm also a CCIA, MCSE, and VCP. And over to you, Remko.
Okay, my name is Remko Weijnen, obviously. I've been working well over 17 years in IT. Started with SBC, virtualization, with XenApp, like most people, I guess. I've been doing that for the last 12 years. I'm very proud that this year I've received the Citrix CTP award. I'm very pleased with that. And I'm also active in the Dutch Citrix user group, also called the ThinKiosk for Dutch people. And I'm one of the founders and steering group members. And well, one of my hobbies has always been development. So whenever I see something that I don't like or I miss something, I try to create it myself. And over the years, I've built up good knowledge of Windows API and the workings of Windows internal. That helps me sort of make me the application compatibility expert. So if you know Windows API, you know how programmers think. This helps you to get all these applications to work in virtual environments. And ultimately, this is where Andrew and I seem to make a good team, because Andrew has been doing lots of great work with ThinKiosk, and I was able to add the last pieces of magic to it. And yeah, that's it basically.
Thanks, Remko. So for anybody who's not familiar with the product, I'm going to go ahead and just give you a quick overview of what is ThinKiosk. So ThinKiosk is a piece of software to turn a Windows PC into a Thin client. I built it for Microsoft Windows primarily because all the other solutions on the market were Linux, and Windows really delivered what I wanted to achieve, which we mentioned earlier on, the HDX redirection, that kind of technology. ThinKiosk was designed to be extremely easy to configure, particularly with version 4. Installation will take you 2 to 3 minutes, assuming you've read the admin guide and you know which way you want to go. As I mentioned, we started developing it back in late 2011, and we released it out to the community for free. Since then, we've seen 4 iterations from version 1 up to version 3, each time changing as I learned the program better and Remko told me I was being silly. So that is ThinKiosk in a nutshell. So I kind of covered off this at the start when Trond asked me, but why did I write ThinKiosk? As I mentioned, I was an architect on a virtualization project. I wasn't happy about the solutions that were on the market. Lacked functionality or were too expensive. They really lacked ambition. Simple shell replacements with launching a process. I think actually, if I think back on it, I added more value or more value into ThinKiosk version 2 than is in most of the paid-for products on Windows currently. And as I mentioned, most of the solutions are based on Linux, and that's all fine and well if you have a Linux guy in-house, but if that Linux guy isn't there, or if he isn't available and you have driver issues, you really are out of luck. I didn't want to waste money on Thin clients because the hardware on the desk was perfectly good. I wanted an easy way to do it, and particularly I wanted an easy way to roll back, because it's fine to turn a PC into a Thin client, but if the user has accidentally left business data on that machine, or it needs access to an application that was only on that machine, reinstalling it or sticking a Linux add-in card is going to really set you back by having to take that out or get back to the original state. So I ultimately thought I could do it better by programming an application myself, so I did, and that's where ThinKiosk came from. So as I mentioned, I wanted it to be based on Windows, and that was primarily for driver compatibility, printers, smart cards, local applications, any kind of local rendering, of course, because the CPU is even in 3-year-old hardware is generally better than what you'll buy on a Thin client or a Zero client today. Microsoft does have much better licensing options for VDI, particularly if you're a software assurance customer, because you get Windows 10 PC, you don't need a VDA for the client. You get better support from vendors as well based on Windows. I mean, if you look at Citrix's product release, generally speaking, the Windows Citrix receiver will receive functionality before any other receiver, and that was very apparent to anybody who wanted to use HDX flash redirection 2 or 3 years ago, because we were waiting close to 18 months for that functionality to be available on Linux. Local application access is also very important. So if you were an RES software customer or a Citrix customer now, reverse seamless technologies with Windows, you can present local applications into the virtual desktop. And of course, ultimately, you do get better in-house support knowledge. Your support guys in companies know how to use Windows. They know how to troubleshoot Windows. They like it and they work with it. So why not try to leverage that skill on site?
Yeah, and as well, you can update the Citrix receiver as the version that you would like to use. Because I remember that with the Thin clients, you always stick with the firmware that the vendors provide to you.
Oh, that's it. And I mean, but that is a very good point as well. I mean, even around the life cycle of Linux Thin clients in general, or Thin clients from vendors, I mean, most Thin client vendors will tout a 7-year lifespan for their Thin clients. But 3 or 4 times now, by 2 different vendors, I've had Thin clients that were 2 to 3 years old drop out of support and no longer receive receiver updates. And if you've based your business case on a 7-year Thin client lifespan, the vendor has just left you in hot water. So that was really why I wanted to get into the Windows on any kind of PC solution, because you're not vendor locked in. because it's Windows, you can do whatever you want to do with it, and that was my rationale at the time. So now that we've had a quick overview, I'm just going to jump into what's new in version 4 and give you a look at the new client, the management console, and that kind of stuff. So what's new in version 4? As I covered off in the blog post, we have released the Community and Enterprise Edition. I'm going to cover off the specifics around those at the moment, or in a minute. We do have a new look and feel. The old client was very basic. It achieves what it needed to achieve, but we were never happy with the interface. So when we decided to push forward with version 4, we wanted to improve its look and feel. And personally, I think it looks really well. I'll let you guys be the judge of that shortly. We wanted ThinKiosk to be even easier to install with version 4. So the out-of-box auto configuration of ThinKiosk is extremely powerful. It will auto-configure itself for most technologies, and we'll cover that off in a few minutes. Active setup, Async is another technology that we've put into ThinKiosk. It's really around being able to run active setup even though you have a shell replacement. We'll cover that off in a second. We've added great support from Microsoft Remote Desktop Services for Citrix HDX file connections and VMware View connections. So previously in ThinKiosk version 3 and below, we were doing a process launcher style, where you could only launch a single process. With version 4, you can layer in as many audio or VDI connections as you wish, depending on your on the version you're using, and present them as shortcuts to the users. We've added a lot of off-domain support because that was one piece of feedback we wanted. We got from our customers a lot. They didn't want to run their Thin clients on the domain. They wanted them off the domain, but they wanted some level of management. So we covered that off. We added central management via our new management server. That took a lot of work to get working, and I'm very, very happy with the results and the speed of the management server, so we'll cover that off. And then finally, Remko is going to give us a rundown of his excellent work with MagicFilter and the value that MagicFilter adds. So as I mentioned, we do have 2 new editions. We have Community Edition and Enterprise Edition. The Community Edition, we wanted to make sure that we stayed firm to our roots, and we had a free product that we were proud to keep and available for the community. Obviously, moving from version 3 that was free up to version 4 with Community and Enterprise, we wanted to make sure you guys had an upgrade path that wasn't chargeable. You didn't have to pay to opt in. Community Edition delivers all of the functionality that was in 3.3, the new look and feel, the new application handling, and it'll always be free. All you have to do is drop us an email telling us how many seats you want. We'll give you a license. We'll never bother you again. The license is also perpetual, so you can have it for as long as you wish. But then there's Enterprise Edition as well, and Enterprise Edition is where we've included the broker, MagicFilter, and active setup Async, really the products that we had to invest heavily in to get working. And we've also included a 1 year of support bundle in Enterprise Edition. So that's the versions out of the way. I'm not going to spend any more time on that. So the new look and feel, I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint today. I am going to show you the new clients and how it looks, and walk you through some of the UI features. So just bear with me while I pull up a VM running Windows 7 x86, and as you can see, ThinKiosk is currently configured to load up a storefront URL. So straight off the bat, I've configured this with a black theme. We have our settings menu here, where we have the usual connections that we had previously to allow the users to control the mouse or the keyboard or the display, or basically whichever ones they wanted. They still got their power options, so they can choose to restart, shut down, or log off. And we've also got this functionality around screenshots. So if you wish to allow the users to take a screenshot of a problem and send it on to the support desk, you can do it via that functionality there. ThinKiosk is a fully fledged browser, so we still have our shortcut links built into the client. This browser URL does actually work. As you can see, ThinKiosk is aware of the logged off screen and storefront I introduced, and will automatically redirect around it. More about that later. And we've got a full browser bar up over here too, so we can choose to allow users to surf the internet should they wish to. The admin menu is in ThinKiosk and can be accessed via the unlock menu too. Lots of new functionality in there. Windows Explorer command prompts. You can choose to tune the internet settings, or DP off to a management server if required, and you can get access to the task manager from the admin menu. By default, this is a locked off menu, which is accessible via password, and I'll show you how that looks afterwards. We've also included a lot of debug logging in ThinKiosk, so when there are any issues, generally speaking, you're going to be able to find the issue yourself from what's going on in here. We've tried to make it as verbose as possible. And that's the admin menu in a nutshell. So I'm just going to lock the kiosk down again. And as you can see, the device locks away and the admin menu disappears. All the usual functionality from 3.3 is still there. So we've still got the clock, we've still got our language selection. It ships by default with Dutch and French, and more languages are on the way. We have our unlock menu, which we showed you a second ago. We've also got a server connection status. So if you want to know whether the client is currently connected to the server or not, this icon will tell you where you are. When it is unlocked, this will also send a heartbeat just to see if you still have a connectivity. One of the biggest changes is the applications tab. No longer do you have a silly little menu up here with a list of applications. We've actually dedicated a screen to the applications tab, and as you can see, it's just a Metro Live tile interface, and you can layer in your VDI connections. So you can also layer in local applications here, and I'll show you that a little later. So you could have a local application or a number of them listed in your dialog box here, and the user can choose whether they want to use a browser session for Citrix, VDI connection to Vue or Microsoft, or indeed a local application. So that is the new look and feel in a nutshell. Everything you see here on the menu can be completely stripped back. So you can leave, as with ThinKiosk previous versions.
Seems like people are having a problem with the audio. Or is the audio better now?
For me, it's good, but
yeah, for me as well.
We'd have to have the attendees say that.
We just got a question as well here, Andrew, if you could explain or do a demo of the enterprise function afterwards, so just to demonstrate the difference between the community edition and enterprise.
Absolutely. I mean, I will give a demo on the management console, which is an enterprise-only feature. Remko will give a demo on MagicFilter, and I'll stick a video up of active setup async on YouTube a little later on, and I'll just make sure that that's covered off in the blog. So I will show you the functionality, most of it tonight, just not active setup async because I don't have a machine ready for that.
Yeah, I'm got a feedback here that the audio is good some places, some other places it's bad, so it's probably the GoToWebinar.
Oh, okay, well I'll try to slow down either way because I can be accused of talking extremely quickly. So that's the look and feel in the nutshell. I'm going to show you how this can be stripped back a little later and what kind of information you can yield from the kiosk itself. But that is ThinKiosk in a nutshell, the new look and feel. So I'm just going to skip back to where we were.
Yeah, we just have a question here that I think we can answer straight away. He's asking if this supports server hosted desktop. So basically, as we've shown now, it supports everything.
But from release, which was last week, we support connections via the Citrix storefront or Citrix web interface to any of the Citrix desktops, be it VDI in a box, Zen desktop, Zen app. We support Microsoft Windows RDS connections to both VDI and server hosted desktops from 2008 or 2 all the way up to Windows Server 2012 or 2, which was released this week and is working with ThinKiosk, thankfully. We support VMware View, both RDP and PC over IP. And you can actually layer in other technologies, for example, Quest View Workspace. We don't have a dedicated shortcut for it, but with the application handling in ThinKiosk 4.0, it is very easy to publish a shortcut to Quest View Workspace too. I expect to see that on the supported list for next release. Okay, so unless there's anything else, I'm going to carry on with the demonstration. Okay, I assume that's fine. So, as I mentioned already, we do have an integrated browser. This was a lot of people were using ThinKiosk simply for an internet kiosk based in their organization, and they wanted the ability to allow the user to browse off to sites specifically, or even in a troubleshooting scenario, allow a custom URL to be entered. I'm quite happy to announce that that has been included in ThinKiosk 4.0. You can choose to allow users to enter their own URL into the browser, and they can use it as a standard browser. At the moment, pop-ups are blocked. There is a private registry fix for that, so get in touch with support or drop a note on the forums if you do need that. It only came to light in the last week or so that we hadn't included it. So it is there if you need it, and get in touch with us and we can do that for you. You can also sorry.
Yeah, just another question here. If this works with a Zen client to push VMs.
To be honest, I haven't tried that. I mean, you could use Zen client as a hypervisor and push a Windows image with ThinKiosk on top. So you'd kind of have a hypervisor-based ThinKios if you wished. I don't see why that wouldn't work. It definitely hasn't been tested, but I'll add that to my list.
Yeah, I would think, or maybe the question is, can you run it as a VM? Yeah, of course you can. You can have one VM with the ThinKiosk locked down, and then you can have your private VM, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, from the Community Edition, that'll work perfectly. From the Enterprise Edition, you just need to have a seat for the VM that you're running. That should work, no problem. So yeah, that's the integrated browser. You can also layer in favorite links over here. So if you have intranet sites aside from a Citrix Access Gateway or anything like that, you can layer them in here and allow the user to choose what resource they want to take. And then you've got your standard Internet Explorer address navigations buttons in the top right, where you've got your home, your refresh, your back forward, and your go. This is based on Internet Explorer, so any website that works in Internet Explorer should, in theory, also work in ThinKiosk. And yeah, that's the browser in a nutshell. The out-of-box auto configuration. So, as we mentioned previously, ThinKiosk, we did want the production version or the version 4 to be as auto-configured as possible, so you guys spend as little time as possible configuring the same group policies as each other as soon as you install the product. So we've included an engine around group policy where we can enable Citrix Receiver, VM review policies, and suppress the standard errors and warnings. By default, ThinKiosk will actually suppress a lot of receivers' chatter about security warnings or about hotkeys being registered and that kind of stuff. So ThinKiosk will actually turn all that off. You can revert that setting if you wish. It's in the profile. It'll out of box. It'll also disable security circumvention methods. So, if for example, the VMware View agent and the Citrix Desktop Viewer agent have web URLs in the actual program, and if you were using them as a kiosk replacement, if you click that URL, you will actually get a new browser. So, for example, ThinKiosk will break that HTTP association as soon as it installs, so that that can't be circumvented. Likewise with the Windows Help and with Util Manager, ThinKiosk will break associations with those applications, so users cannot get to them, meaning that once ThinKiosk has been installed and configured, the user can't get around it. It's just the only shell that's available, should you choose it to be that way. Previously, of course, with version 3 and below, you used to have to configure the auto logon policy yourself, so that meant potentially putting your auto logon details as clear text in a group policy. It wasn't ideal. It was the only way we could do it at the time. But now ThinKiosk will do all that itself. So it'll use the local group policy engine to configure auto logon. It'll use the local LSA to hide the password in a secure part of Windows, and it'll also choose to replace the shell with group policy, which is the highest possible priority, meaning that if a thin client vendor has their own way of handling a shell, ThinKiosk will always win out.
Question here, Andrew: are you going to cover the MagicFilter and the wireless connection thing later in the presentation?
So the wireless isn't going to be available in version 4. It's going to be available in version 4.1. We've had one or two setbacks on wireless with the libraries we're using, but yes, we will be covering off MagicFilter in 6 or 7 slides when Remko takes over.
Definitely.
So again, it automatically locks down device, so it'll disable access to drives, to Task Manager, to the Run key, and of course you can lift those restrictions by pressing Control-Alt-U and logging in as the administrator and allowing the administrator to quickly get the desktop back. It auto creates its own user account, so you no longer need to create the user if you're running in an off-domain configuration. ThinKiosk will create its own account, and in fact, it prefers to use its own account anyway. So if you are running off domain, that would be the way to do it. an annoyance in the Internet Explorer browser, particularly in proof of concept, when you're setting up VMware View or you're setting up VDI in a box, you'll get an SSL certificate warning and you have to press continue to proceed. ThinKiosk will detect SSL warnings and redirect around them just for your users' benefit. So that's in there too.
So there's no more excuse to not use HTTPS, and so this is very good security improvement.
Absolutely. I was also not very popular with the VDI in a box team when I published how to circumvent their HTTPS, so I figured I owed them this. ThinKiosk will also only publish applications that are available, so if you try to publish an application that isn't installed, the users won't see it, so they won't get an error message when they try to launch it, they just won't see it. So a quick note on active setup async. Common problem with shell replacement is active setup. A number of programs relying on Internet Explorer particularly has a large requirement on active setup. ThinKiosk is now active setup aware. It's aware of what keys need to run. It runs it in a multi-threaded fashion, so instead of running one component at a time, it fires off threads of active setup, getting about a 30 to 40% speed increase depending on how many CPUs you have. Obviously, the more CPUs you have, the faster it's going to go. Active setup is particularly handy for if you're using flash redirection or anything like that, where there is a browser requirement that active setup has run. So active setup is included in the Enterprise Edition. VDI connections, as we pointed out there, we do have connections natively for RDS, View, and for Zen app as well. I'm actually just going to we handle the authentication ourselves, so the user doesn't send their password in any kind of clear text or visible manner, and I'll give you a quick demo how that works now. So at the moment, I'll show you the RDS connection first. So once you've configured an RDS connection, it's just dropping in an RDP file for all intents and purposes. The user is invited to log in as themselves, which I'm going to do now. ThinKiosk detects that a desktop is started, this appears, and the user is now in his remote desktop. That is really as easy as it is. The user is now logged in, no additional prompts, no SSL error messages, no double prompts for authentication. The user is on his desktop, and there he shall remain for the rest of the day. Similarly, we'll wait for ThinKiosk to come back in. There we go. It's also now ready for the next user because the user authenticated as themselves on the application launch rather than logging onto the machine. Same for VMware View. If we do a login again, ThinKiosk disappears, View agent comes up, finds my desktop that I've specified, and connects me back in. At this point, ThinKiosk will stay in the background, won't reappear again until the session has ended. And there I am on my VMware View connection desktop. Very, very, very easy and very easy to configure. Sorry, let's log off here. And as I mentioned, we can also do VMware View RDS as well. So you can have one single broker area where you can also connect your task workers and such over to terminal services as well using the same View client, and the users can choose the desktop they want. It's worth noting that these connections can also be auto-launched, so if you like the desktop to launch as soon as the kiosk starts in the morning, or if you prefer to do it on a user basis, that is supported. And VMware View also has the ability to log in as the local user, so if you want to use the local user's credentials, you can do that via VMware View. So that is the VDI connections in a nutshell. And then the off-the-domain support. So as I mentioned previously, we do have a lot of group policies in there that you'd normally configure when they are on the domain. ThinKiosk has options and will actually turn all of this functionality off itself unless you tell it not to. So it'll restrict access to local disks, control panel items, task manager, runbox, the control-alt-delete screen. It'll turn all those items off, and of course if you're running enterprise, it'll go one step further and actually completely block out the keystrokes, control-alt-delete and Windows key and L, redirecting them to the desktop, but Remko will cover that off in a little bit. We can manage it or off-domain devices with a startup script. So if you need to deploy the latest version of Receiver, or you need to deploy the latest View agent or a Windows update, you can use the ThinKiosk client profile from FTP or from the management broker to script the startup script, connecting in, checking the version of the receiver, and downloading and installing the latest version. I have quite a few examples of scripts that you can use for this, and I'll be publishing them on the forums in the next couple of days. Profiles can be deployed as part of the installation via an FTP server, or if you're using enterprise via broker. So there is no requirement for group policy anymore to deploy configuration. We can also remote control the endpoints now with version 4 in the management console. So if you do have off-domain machines and you'd like to still be able to access the user's desktop, you can do it via the remote control functionality. In version 4.1, we'll have an option to enable email-based remote connection, so you'll no longer need that management console piece if you don't need it.
I've got a question here, Andrew. If I remember correctly, you can install this on real thin clients as well, right? As long as it's Windows OS.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And there is a really strong use case for ThinKiosk on thin clients, because locking down a Windows client for VDI access is quite painful, particularly if you're using browser lockdown, or if you're trying to hide Explorer, or if you're trying to launch a single file. That's all fine, but enterprise will have more needs than just a single executable running and restarting. Using ThinKiosk on top of thin clients, you'll get a really easy look and feel for the user to log into. It looks just like a thin client access point, and you also get the benefit of MagicFilter, which MagicFilter, we are the only thin client on the market who can block, control, alt delete, and redirect it to a VDI desktop, regardless of what version of Windows you're running on. So I mean, that's a really good functionality to have on a thin client. And because our broker isn't dependent on what hardware you're running, you guys can stay agnostic as to what thin clients you're using as well. So if you just want a Windows thin client, you no longer have to buy into whatever management stack is provided by the thin client. ThinKiosk will manage itself from its own server, leaving you to choose between Windows thin clients, Windows PCs, or whatever else you can run Windows on. So the management broker itself is a very, very lightweight service. It can run on a Windows box. It could be Windows XP or Windows 7 or Windows Server operating system. There's no SQL requirement. It has its own native database, and it uses its own proprietary port 11,000 for the management console and the machines. We can use this management console for remote control, and I'm going to show you how that works now in a minute. So without further ado, I'll actually give you a demo of the management console as well. So from my machine here, I have the management console client, and I'm logged into the console. The console is split into two portions, devices and profiles. Very simple. You create a folder and you assign a profile to it, and then you drop the devices into the folder as you see fit. So the machine I've been testing with at the moment is this TK-Win7x86 machine. From the console, I can see the last IP address, the last heard time, the last boot time, all kinds of information about the client that you may have wanted and couldn't get in version 3.3. You can also get reports on the clients out there, so you can choose which headings you want to see in here. So for example, if you want the receiver version and you want the last time I booted up, you can layer that stuff in and then copy it out into Excel, and you have your report for management or whoever else.
We're getting a question here from Chris regarding backup of this database.
So every time the database starts, or every time the service starts and stops, it'll take a backup of itself. You can choose to back up the file using Windows backup methods. So it's just like a standard server. Back it up at any given time. There's no lock held on the database unless it's in use. And even with volume shadow copy, you should be able to copy it out when it is in use. The easiest way to take a backup is just stop the service and copy the file out. And to do a restore, stop the service and copy the file back in again. So in a situation where, and I haven't come across a database corruption yet, but in a situation where it does happen, stop the service, restore the file back in, start the service back up again, and you're ready to go.
So you could probably script it then and put it off to a file share that's having normal backup running.
Oh, absolutely. And if you chose to do that, but any standard Windows backup utility will take this file out even if it is in use. So it's all included. out of box. Support for Microsoft SQL is in process. I expect to see it in version 4.1 or 4.2. I didn't want to include it in the first version because it's really not needed. There's no need for you to be using Microsoft SQL for a thin client management product. The database is so lightweight. I mean, I've managed to test this up to 6,000 devices, and the database was less than a meg in size. You know, it's very, very fast. It's very lightweight, and let's reduce the cost where we can.
And it's ideal for proof of concept environments, because you don't have a requirement on the database or SQL where you possibly need all kinds of other people. You can very rapidly deploy this and show it to your customers.
Oh, that's exactly it. I mean, the broker takes less than 30 seconds to install. The password is in the administrative guide. Changing that password takes a whole of 5 seconds, and after that you are ready to go. Create your profile in 2 or 3 minutes, point the client at the management console, and you're done. That's it. No more policies need to be done on the client. And you can even choose to install it into the directory you wish on the command line of the installer as well. So it is extremely, extremely easy to do.
And as you mentioned before, you can actually revert back to the old situation if your POC is finished.
Absolutely. So if your proof of concept does not go well for whatever reason, you can revert the machines back to normal PCs with the click of a switch. So we're kind of going off here, but if you look at the profile, open another screen, under auto logon, you can turn off auto logon and you can turn off ThinKiosk as shell, and next time ThinKiosk starts up, it's a PC again. So it's the version 4.0 was developed with speed in mind. You can have this on a desk in a matter of minutes and ready in testing. And then flipping it from one technology to another is extremely easy. So that's the default layout. So we have devices and folders, and by default devices folder is where a new device will register itself. Assuming you modify that profile, you're now ready for production. You can choose to layer them out depending on the roles they're doing and the applications you wish to appear. And that's really it. That there is so little to this console. It's nice and easy. We have 4 buttons up the top where we can search, and we could choose to find a user who's logged into a thin client at the time. We can refresh, pulling the latest information from the server. We have our licensing details there. That's an enterprise key, so I'm not going to hold that open for long. And there is the audit trail as well. So the audit trail is a feature that just came out in the late version of 4.0, and any change that happens via any administrator is logged in here. So it gives you some level of kind of comfort that if anybody makes a change, you can know about it, and clearing it is very, very simple. And that's it, done. From a device point of view, we've got some very simple commands like log off, restart, shut down, update, and remote control. Remote control is personally my favorite. And without much ado, there is my Windows 7 VM in a remote control session, and I can choose to help the user in how we're going to proceed. Very, very simple, very, very easy. By default, ThinKiosk does require the user to accept the acknowledgement, but in the profile there is an option to turn that off, and that's the way I have it configured at the moment. For example, if I look at the demo folder, which is where it is, and I look at the profile, which is demo, I can jump over to that profile. And on the last tab, you'll see that I've chosen not to require permission. By default, that is not turned on. We can also send batch commands like log off, restart, shut down, and update. For example, if I change the color scheme of the profile, so then it's appearance, change it to gray, save it, right click, and update that device. If we hop over to the device again, ThinKiosk will start back up in a gray theme, and that is as easy as it is. The startup script I mentioned earlier, so if you want to manage this client off the domain, in the profile, we have a startup script. And in here, you can layer in the changes for installing the latest version of the client, installing Vue, installing ThinKiosk, the latest version, or whatever else. The startup script, basically, if you can script it, you can do it, and that is a great feature for managing clients off the domain. And that is the management console in a nutshell. I'm not going to spend much more time on it. As I said, it's very simple to install, very simple to configure, and you layer your changes in based on the profile that they're attached. One last thing I can show you is to show you how much you can lock down this client and how much you can configure this client. I'm just going to drop this device into a locked down profile. So basically show nothing except for what we need. And what we should see now is the client has absolutely no buttons whatsoever other than the Citrix logon. So that would be what I consider an extremely locked down client where you only require a login with the additional functionality of ThinKiosk. And similarly, you can do the exact same thing for the applications where you have an RDS or a VMware View environment. Send an update again, pre-prepared profile, client starts back up again. And again, we're in our RDS connection with no options available at the top. We can choose what to turn on and what to turn off. Do we have any questions around the management server before I move on?
Yeah, we have some question here regarding, can the port be renamed or changed, the default 11,000?
Absolutely. So 11,000 is configured in the server in the configuration file. There's a configuration file in the broker service directory. I might actually be able to get to it and show you here. Never go off script and live demos and all that, but let's see. So on the server, program 566, ThinKiosk broker, in the config file, we can see that the port is configured just there. So if you want to change away from 11,000, you be my guest. Change that port, change that value, restart the service. ThinKiosk will listen on a new port. That's it. And as I mentioned earlier, the password is also stored in here as well. So if you want to change the default password, there it is. This is going to be included in the database in the next version.
Okay. Renaming the clients from the brokers as possible is a question.
So no, it's not. I'm going to be releasing a service release next Wednesday, and there will be an executable included in the binary folder in ThinKiosk. So should you need to rename the devices, you could do that via a remote control or via script. With version 4.1, yes, there will be an option to rename the clients. And
if you want to reinstall a client, will it remember the folder location inside of the management console? It's another question.
Absolutely. So the unique ID needed for the management server is the computer name. Now the computer name doesn't need to be unique, but if you wish all of your computers to appear, you should have the computer name as a unique value. If the computer name is a unique value, the client will check straight back into where it was previously.
And a final question here regarding the profiles scripting. It's running in the current user context, right?
So the startup script is running as system, and that happens on startup. A login script will be added in 4.1, so you can run in the user context too.
And 4.1 is going to be released next week. What are they?
No. The next feature release is going to be next week, where we've got 1 or 2 bug fixes to put in there. Nothing production affecting, just a couple of minor niggles the customers have requested. So that's going to be out next week. I'd expect version 4.1 before Christmas. And that'll include, as I mentioned, SQL, wireless, and the renaming of the computer option. Okay, so unless there's anything else.
No, you also have a question here regarding the enterprise and the free version, and if you sign up, you get a 30-day trial, right?
Yeah, so by default, when you install ThinKiosk version 4, it goes straight into a 30-day trial. If you want to bring it back down to community, no problem. As I said, just drop me an email. You'll have a license within the next 24 hours, and you can have at it with that license. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Remko, and he's going to tell us a little bit about MagicFilter.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andrew, so far. I'll show my screen. You should be seeing the PowerPoints now. Well, MagicFilter. So I'm going to repeat a little, why did we come up with MagicFilter? In fact, one of the things I see with a user that's working with remote desktop, remote applications, the technology has become so good that users don't really realize that they're working remotely. So what do they expect? They press Control-Alt-Delete because they do that at home. And it's hard to explain to a user why that either doesn't work or gives Control-Alt-Delete, but it's not really Control-Alt-Delete, but it's the local Control-Alt-Delete and not the remote. I think at that point, we've probably lost the user. So if we want to give the user the experience that they deserve, we need to do better. And as Andrew said before, there is currently no vendor that can block Control-Alt-Delete locally, let alone send these keys onto the remote session. So we saw this challenge, and we started to work on it. And we had a few design goals. We wanted something that's absolutely stable. So that ruled out using a solution that is driver-based. That would have been the easiest solution. But the point with the driver is if you do make just the slightest bug, you will crash a whole machine. And that's something we wanted to avoid at all costs. So MagicFilter is just an executable. It's running in user space. That's all it does. That was a very important point for us. We also wanted to support all the major products. So again, we're supporting RDS, we're supporting XenApps and desktop, we're supporting Vue. So we're having all these technologies available and give the user a good experience. And finally, we wanted to fully integrate into ThinKiosk. So the whole thing can be managed from the admin interface. We can enable and disable this at will. I think this is important when, for instance, an admin or a support staff comes to a ThinKiosk machine. They should be able to temporarily disable this. So we built this in. Well, obviously we had some technical challenges, especially when Microsoft left XP and started with Vista. They spent a lot of time making the operating system more secure. Internally, Microsoft calls control delete the secure attention sequence, and they took absolutely a lot of measures to be able us to not block control delete. So we had to work around it. And luckily we could use a library that I wrote some time ago to solve that part for us. But another problem was that, you know, all the vendors use their own key sequence. It would have been so easy if they were just using the same sequence. And MagicFilter is actually intelligent. So if you have multiple remote sessions open, it actually sees which one you're working with, and it sends the correct sequence to be able to trigger what the user is requesting in the remote session. And a final problem that we needed to tackle was that some vendors use their own hooking mechanisms, for instance, to redirect a Windows key press or Control-Shift-Escape for Task Manager. And we need to be on top of stack, but we wanted to keep this user experience. So it's important that we see it first, but if we're not handling it, we're still passing it on so that either Citrix, Microsoft, or whatever application you're using can give the experience, use the key, e.g. Windows R to run or Windows E for Explorer. So these were some challenges that we had to overcome. So what it resulted in? We have a small executable. It's just 1 meg in size, which is, well, almost nothing nowadays. We support all the protocols, we support all the clients, we automatically detect what you're using, even if you have multiple open at the same time. And I think we've managed to make this user experience seamless. So the user doesn't really see that he's working remotely. He presses his keys, actions happen, he gets visual feedback. For instance, locking the screen on the newest operating systems, this may take a few seconds. So we try to dim the screen to give the user the same experience as with user account control. Something is happening to make this experience good. And just like ThinKiosk, we've added localization, so all languages supported in ThinKiosk are also supported in MagicFilter. Well, enough talk, let's do a little demo. I wanted to show 2 things. First thing is a Citrix XenApp session that I have open, and we're just going to use MagicFilter to redirect the key press and see what's happening remotely. So here we go. I'm in the remote session now. Obviously you can't see my fingers pressing the keys, so you'll have to take my word on that one. But I'm pressing Control-Alt-Delete now, and I'm nicely going to the secure attention screen, and I could lock the screen here, change my password, or whatever options are available to me. And the same if I press Windows L to lock the screen. you'll see that the screen locks nicely, and actually the remote session is locked, but my local session isn't at this point. So it's really remoted to remote desktop. My PowerPoint is still visible, and I can unlock and work on. Well, let's do the same thing, but now with an RDS session. So I have shortcut to an RDP session here. I'll maximize this out, and I can press Ctrl-Alt-Delete. I go to the lock screen, and the same with Windows Lock. And we go to the lock screen as expected. Again, we support all operating systems. The geek that I am, I even tested this on Windows NT4 terminal server, and it actually worked. So, but realistically, we support all major operating systems. So we support Windows 2003, Server 2008, 2008 R2, 2012, 2012 R2, and the desktop versions as well. So I think that's a broad support for anything you're using, be it the latest version or be it at an older version. It's all supported and with full functionality. So that's basically the demo part. And I think Andy is up next to wrap up. Unless there's questions, but I think we have some room for questions later on.
Yeah, just go on, and I will take the question in the end if there pops up anymore.
Okay, pass over control when you get a minute, Remko. Okay, just bear with me 2 seconds. I'll get the monitor back on the right screen. Okay, and we should see my presentation now in a second. Okay, great. So I'm just going to, we're running out of time, so I'm just going to wrap up with why ThinKiosk. This is really just as a you know, why you should be using it for your projects or for yourself. The desktop hardware your customer is using or you are using is probably fine. There is no need to throw it in the bin unless it's broken. Don't do it. ThinKiosk rollout time is seconds, and I mean, and this makes a massive reduction in capex and opex, particularly when it, you know, from a capex point of view, you don't need to throw good hardware out. From an opex point of view, you don't need to run around taking all the PCs off the desk. You don't need to run around installing Linux on the PCs. You don't need to add USB keys that'll get stolen, and you don't need to you know, reinstall the operating system. With ThinKiosk, you can deploy via a startup script, and while you're migrating that user over, you can install ThinKiosk, allowing you to roll back in seconds in case the user's left something behind. From a licensing point of view, ThinKiosk is inordinately cheaper than any other product on the market doing what it does, has half the functionality, and from a licensing perspective, Microsoft's solution of software assurance plus ThinKiosk is far cheaper when taking the VDA license into account on a Zero client or any other Thin client. It is much cheaper to do it with ThinKiosk.
Yeah, and in terms of the licensings, what is the cost, or do you want to redirect them to your website?
So I mean, yeah, so I mean, happy to answer that question offline because Microsoft licensing is very complicated when it comes to this kind of thing. But from a Thin client point of view, if you're using a Windows PC, you don't need to pay a VDA license for it if it's covered under software assurance, which means you get ThinKiosk, no VDA, and you also get ThinPC on the current hardware. So you can kill that XP machine with a newer operating system, which is Windows 7 under the hood. You don't have to pay the VDA license for it if you've got software assurance. And ThinKiosk is cheaper than any other product out there.
So you have the prices for the ThinKiosk on your website, right?
So it's on the next page. And also bear in mind, Community Edition is free. And it still delivers more functionality than any other vendor out there. So unless you need MagicFilter and the management console and everything else, Community Edition might be fine for what you want. leveraging local rendering and reverse seamless applications and quick rollback is a really good tool to have in your belt when you're doing a VDI project. If you cannot get an application working in the virtual desktop, reverse seamless it. Just leave it on the PC, present it to the user, let them work in their virtual desktop while you run around like a headless chicken remediating that application. ThinKiosk will allow you to do that, and it's included in the Citrix license. And as I mentioned, with the central management console and MagicFilter, our software is best in class. There's nobody else who can stand up to us. There's no other Windows vendor out there doing it, and the Linux products, I just don't rate them compared to what we're doing.
We have a question here regarding using only the MagicFilter without installing ThinKiosk on a thin client, as iGel, for example.
Okay, so MagicFilter might make it out of the product at the moment. We don't have any plans to release it as a separate product at the very present moment in time. And that may very well change, but at the moment, no, MagicFilter is part of the ThinKiosk stack.
So if you are considering MagicFilter for large deployment without ThinKiosk, well, drop us an email. We can always chat about it and see what's possible.
Absolutely. We don't want to close the door, but at present, we have no plans to put it out as a separate product. So the licensing cost, Community Edition, it's free. Just request a license, as we covered all the way through. You can even get support on the Community Edition if you choose to. You don't have to, completely optional, but it is €6 per desktop if you want it. The Enterprise Edition, we're running an introductory 40% discount, which is €17 per desktop, and that includes a year of support. After the first year, €6 per desktop for support, and that is completely optional. So it's opt-in. If you choose not to and everything's working fine, no problems from us. Okay, so we have 4 minutes left, so if you guys have any questions, please furiously start tapping.
Any consideration regarding antivirus on a lockdown ThinKiosk client?
Okay, so if you're using ThinKiosk on top of ThinPC or on top of a current Thin client which has a RAM caching filter, so long as you've got the firewall configured, I see no need for you to have antivirus running. The machine's reset at night, everything is running in user mode, and you're not giving them access to browse off to malicious websites. If you are allowing them access to browsing the sites, you may want to consider antivirus. But from a VDI point of view and a Thin client's jump off point of view, I see very little risk in the chance of a virus outbreak when using this.
We have another question here. If you want to get away from local hard drives, is there any options for USB drives or anything like that?
At the moment, no. I mean, Windows to Go could be an option. So, I mean, in theory, if Windows 8.1 or if a new version of ThinPC does become available and you can install it on the USB key, absolutely, we'd be happy to support that because we just sit on top of Windows. But we're going to be at the mercy of Microsoft to decide whether they want that is a direction they'd like to go. Absolutely, from a POC point of view, just head over to our website. thinscaletechnology.com. It's on your screen there. Request a download, request a community license or use the trial, and download the admin guide. You'll be up and running in a matter of minutes, and it's as simple as that.
Yes, it is. It's that simple. So thank you guys for joining the show. It's been a pleasure having you here. People are loving the webinar.
Thanks very much for having us, Trent. I really enjoyed it.
And of course, thanks everybody who tuned in to listen to us and watch. So thanks a lot, and we're very interested in your feedback.
Yeah, so you can just probably get in touch with the social media that you have up on the screen right now, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, folks, that's it. I will be sending out an email, and you will also get a link to next month's webinar, which we are going to run with Helge Klein, also a CTP, and he's going to cover how to troubleshoot a virtual environment with Uber Agent and Splunk.
If you haven't seen Helge talk before, I seriously recommend you come to the next webinar. He is an absolute genius.
Second that.
Totally agree.